I was a devoted husband to Amanda for 3 beautiful years. Our life in Seattle seemed picture perfect, from our cozy suburban home to our thriving careers. Sunday dinners with her tight-knit Italian-American family became a cherished tradition. I thought they had accepted me as one of their own, especially after helping her sister Jessica through tough times. Then one evening, Jessica showed up at our door in tears. That single moment, that devastating lie, destroyed everything I had built. If you are watching this story, drop a comment telling me where you are viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how a false accusation shattered my world. 5 years ago, I met Amanda at our mutual friend Paul's housewarming party. She stood in the kitchen laughing, her dark hair falling over her shoulders as she mixed drinks for everyone. When our eyes met, I felt that rare instant connection people talk about, but I never believed in. We started talking about hiking trails around Washington State and discovered our shared love for cooking and traveling to offbeat locations. That night turned into morning as we sat on Paul's balcony, discussing everything from our favorite books to our childhood dreams. After exchanging numbers, we went on our first official date to a small Italian restaurant in Pike Place Market. Amanda talked about her kindergarten class with such passion that I couldn't help falling for her immediately. Our relationship progressed naturally through weekend hiking trips in the Cascades, cooking elaborate meals together, and meeting each other's friends. 2 years of dating culminated in my proposal at Olympic National Park during a sunset hike to our favorite viewpoint. I had carried the ring in my pocket all day, nervous it would fall out on the trail. When she said yes, tears streaming down her face, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding was intimate, just 70 of our closest friends and family, at a rustic venue overlooking Puget Sound. Amanda's father, Frank, gave a surprisingly emotional toast that ended with him finally calling me son instead of Brendan. Her mother, Maria, hugged me tightly, whispering welcome to the family in my ear. We bought our first home in a quiet Seattle suburb, a charming 3-bedroom craftsman with a backyard, perfect for the vegetable garden Amanda always wanted. My career as a software engineer at a promising tech startup provided financial stability, while Amanda thrived as a kindergarten teacher at Pinewood Elementary. We talked about starting our own family soon, making plans to convert 1 bedroom into a nursery within the next year. Amanda's Italian-American heritage meant family always came first. Her parents had immigrated from Naples in their 20s, bringing those strong traditional values with them. Every Sunday afternoon, we gathered at her parents' sprawling house for enormous family dinners. Maria would spend all day cooking while Frank manned the grill, creating feasts that left everyone in food comas. Initially, Amanda's older brothers Marcus and Anthony scrutinized my every move. Marcus, the eldest at 35, ran the family construction business with Frank and had appointed himself Amanda's protector since childhood. Anthony, 3 years younger, worked as a firefighter and approached everything with intense suspicion. The first few months of dating Amanda involved thinly veiled interrogations from both brothers about my intentions, career prospects, and family background. Over time, I won them over through persistence and genuine interest in their lives. I helped Marcus with his website for the construction company and joined Anthony's recreational basketball league. Slowly, their cold stares transformed into backslaps and invitations to watch football games. Being accepted into the Romano family felt like earning an exclusive membership to a tight-knit club. Jessica was Amanda's younger sister by 3 years, the baby of the family at 25. Unlike the rest of the disciplined, hard-working Romanos, Jessica drifted between jobs, relationships, and apartments. Her dramatic personal life was a constant topic at family gatherings, usually discussed in hushed tones when she wasn't present. When she got fired from her receptionist job for repeatedly arriving late, I offered to help by recommending her for an administrative position at my company. She got the job based partly on my vouching for her reliability. That was my first mistake. Jessica would often stop by my office with questions about workplace protocols or computer issues. I never thought twice about helping her, viewing it as supporting Amanda's family. Sometimes, she would stand uncomfortably close or find reasons to touch my arm while thanking me. But I dismissed these moments as her naturally flirtatious personality. Her latest boyfriend, Tyler, had recently broken up with her after discovering she had been texting her ex. This led to Jessica moving back into her parents' house temporarily, adding another layer of tension to our Sunday dinners. Frank and Maria doted on her as she played the heartbroken victim, while Amanda spent hours on the phone, counseling her through teary late-night calls. The week before everything fell apart, Jessica seemed oddly withdrawn at Sunday dinner, barely making eye contact with me. Amanda left early with a migraine, but I stayed to help Frank set up his new smart TV. As I was preparing to leave, Jessica asked if I could help her with a problem on her laptop. Maria insisted I stay for a cup of coffee and dessert after helping, so I agreed, texting Amanda that I'd be home a little later. While fixing Jessica's computer, she stood behind me commenting on how good I was with technology. When I finished, she thanked me with a hug that lasted a beat too long. I gently disengaged, making a joke about needing to get home to my wife. Something in her expression shifted momentarily, but I thought nothing of it. That week, Amanda seemed distant, checking her phone constantly and responding to my questions with one-word answers. When I asked if something was bothering her, she insisted everything was fine, blaming work stress. Looking back, I should have recognized the signs of what was coming. It was a Thursday evening when our doorbell rang unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen preparing chicken parmesan, Amanda's favorite, hoping to reconnect after the strange tension of the past few days. Amanda answered the door, and I heard Jessica's voice shaky and tearful. They moved to the living room while I continued cooking, only half listening to their murmured conversation. Then Jessica raised her voice, making sure I could hear her clearly from the kitchen. "I need to tell you something, Amanda. I'm pregnant." I smiled reflexively, thinking how this might actually help Jessica settle down and become more responsible. But her next words froze me in place, knife still in hand over the cutting board. "It's Brendan's." The wooden spoon I was holding clattered to the floor as I rushed into the living room. Amanda stood facing Jessica, her face drained of all color. Jessica sat on our couch, eyes red and puffy hands protectively cradling her still flat stomach. "What did you just say?" I sputtered, unable to process the absurd accusation. Jessica looked up with an expression of practiced vulnerability. "It happened when he stayed late to help me with my computer last week. It's not the first time, Amanda. We've been seeing each other for months now." "That is absolutely not true," I protested, looking desperately at my wife. "Amanda, you know me. You know I would never do this." But Amanda wasn't looking at me. Her eyes remained fixed on her sister, searching for any sign of deception and finding none. Jessica had always been a convincing actress, especially with her family. "How could you?" Amanda whispered, finally turning to face me. Her voice was eerily calm, but her eyes burned with a rage I'd never seen before. "Amanda, she's lying. Nothing happened between us. Nothing has ever happened." I took a step toward her, hands outstretched. The slap came so quickly, I barely saw it coming. Amanda struck me across the face with enough force to snap my head to the side, leaving my cheek stinging and my ear ringing. "My sister would never lie about something like this," she hissed through clenched teeth. She grabbed her phone from the coffee table and walked into our bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Left alone with Jessica, I turned to confront her. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, keeping my voice low so Amanda wouldn't hear. For the briefest moment, Jessica's mask slipped. A cold, calculated look flashed across her face before the tears returned. She picked up her phone as it buzzed with a text message, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. It was from someone named Alex with the message, "Did she believe you?" Before I could say anything else, Amanda emerged from the bedroom, her eyes red, but her expression hardened. I could tell from her rigid posture that she'd already made her decision about who to believe. "I called my family," she said flatly. "They'll be here soon. I want you out of this house tonight." "Amanda, please listen to me," I begged, my voice breaking. "This makes no sense. Why would I cheat on you? Why would I risk everything we've built?" "Maybe you should have thought about that before you slept with my sister," she replied coldly. "How long has this been going on? All those times you stayed late to help her, were you sleeping together then too?" It felt like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. Every denial I offered was met with another accusation. Every explanation was twisted into further evidence of my guilt. While Amanda packed some of my clothes into a duffel bag, Jessica sat on our couch occasionally, letting out a perfectly timed sob whenever Amanda looked her way. When I tried to approach Amanda again, she recoiled, as if my touch might burn her. She turned to Jessica protectively and asked if she was okay if I had threatened her in any way. The absurdity of the situation left me speechless. 20 minutes later, car doors slammed outside. The Romano family had arrived in full force. Frank came through our front door without knocking, followed closely by Maria, Marcus, and Anthony. Their faces were contorted with fury as they took in the scene, Jessica crying on the couch, Amanda standing protectively beside her, and me standing helplessly in the middle of the living room. "You son of a bitch," Marcus growled, advancing toward me. I tried to back away, hands raised. "This is all a misunderstanding. I didn't touch Jessica. She's lying." My protests fell on deaf ears. Marcus' punch caught me squarely in the jaw, sending me stumbling backward into the bookshelf. Photo frames crashed to the floor, including our wedding portrait, the glass shattering across the hardwood. Before I could regain my balance, Anthony grabbed me by the shirt collar and slammed me against the wall. "We welcomed you into our family," Frank said, his voice deadly quiet as his sons held me pinned. "We trusted you with our daughter." Maria stood behind them, one arm around each of her daughters. The look of disgust on her face cut deeper than the physical blows. Anthony landed another punch to my ribs that left me gasping for air. When I tried to defend myself, pushing back against his grip, Marcus took it as aggression and hit me again, this time splitting my lip. "Stop it," Amanda shouted, though I couldn't tell if she was addressing me or her brothers. "You're destroying the house." From my position against the wall, I saw Jessica watching the scene unfold. When no one else was looking at her, I caught the smallest hint of satisfaction in her expression. The next few minutes passed in a blur of pain and humiliation. Amanda disappeared into our bedroom, returning with armfuls of my clothes, which she proceeded to throw onto the front lawn through the open front door. Our neighbors stood on their porches watching the spectacle in horrified fascination as the Romano brothers dragged me outside, still struggling and protesting my innocence. "Get your stuff and get out," Amanda said, tossing my laptop bag onto the grass where it landed with a concerning thud. "Don't come back, don't call me, don't contact anyone in my family." Blood dripping from my split lip onto my shirt, I gathered what I could of my scattered belongings. Marcus stood guard, arms crossed, making sure I didn't approach the house again. Through the open door, I could see Maria comforting Jessica, who continued her award, worthy performance of the traumatized victim. That night, I slept in my car, in a Walmart parking lot, using a gym membership to shower the next morning. My calls and texts to Amanda went unanswered and eventually blocked. When I arrived at work, my access card was denied. A sympathetic coworker informed me that Jessica had gone to HR with claims that I had been sexually harassing her for months. I was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. By afternoon, my company email stopped working. By evening, I discovered Amanda had emptied our joint bank accounts, leaving me with only what was in my personal savings. 2 days later, I was served with a restraining order preventing me from coming within 500 feet of Jessica or my own home. I stayed with the only friend willing to believe something wasn't right about the situation. Pete offered his couch and a sympathetic ear, but even he seemed hesitant, unsure what to believe. Other friends gradually stopped returning my calls, undoubtedly having heard Jessica's version of events through the grapevine. In desperate need of someone to believe me, I drove to Amanda's parents' house when I knew Jessica would be at work. Maria answered the door but wouldn't let me inside. Her eyes, so warm and maternal just weeks ago now, regarded me with cold revulsion. "Take responsibility for once in your life," she said. "Jessica is having tests done tomorrow to confirm how far along she is." I showed her my location timeline from my phone, proving I had only been at their house for the amount of time everyone knew about. I offered to take a paternity test as soon as possible. I begged her to consider why Jessica might be lying. Her response was to close the door in my face. As I turned to leave, Anthony pulled up in his truck. He got out slowly, his expression making his intentions clear. "The restraining order doesn't cover me," he said, advancing toward me. "Get out of here before I finish what we started." I retreated to my car, any hope of reason fading. The community we'd built our life in had turned against me overnight. Every place that had once felt like home now felt hostile and dangerous. Jessica's lie had metastasized, growing larger and more elaborate with each telling. I learned through a former coworker that she had reconstructed every interaction Wed ever had, painting me as a predator who had been grooming and manipulating her. After 2 weeks of sleeping in my car, making failed attempts to clear my name, and watching my professional reputation disintegrate, I made the hardest decision of my life. I wrote Amanda one final letter, pouring my heart onto the page, swearing my innocence, and expressing my heartbreak at her instant distrust after 3 years of marriage. I slipped the letter into our mailbox when I knew she would be at work. Then I sold my car, liquidated my remaining possessions, and withdrew my $401k, despite the substantial penalties. With nothing left to keep me in a city that had turned against me, I booked a one-way ticket to Denver, Colorado, and disappeared without telling a soul where I was going. The Denver skyline looked nothing like Seattle. No Space Needle, no Puget Sound, no familiar mountains on the horizon. That was exactly what I needed. A place with no memories, no associations, nowhere I might accidentally run into someone who knew me or had heard Jessica's lies about me. I arrived with 2 suitcases and a broken spirit, checking into an extended stay hotel while I figured out my next steps. For the first few days, I barely left the room, nursing my physical and emotional wounds. The bruises from Marcus and Anthony's beating had faded to sickly yellow-green, but the deeper injuries to my trust and self-worth seemed permanently damaged. Using my middle name, Michael or Mike, to new acquaintances became a small way to reinvent myself. Brendan was the naive fool who trusted his wife's family. Mike would be smarter, more cautious, less willing to be vulnerable. Finding housing came first, a small studio apartment in an anonymous neighborhood far from downtown. The place was barely 500 square feet with a kitchenette that could generously be described as minimalist, but it required no credit check and accepted cash for the deposit. The landlord, an elderly man named Walter, who lived on the first floor, didn't ask questions beyond whether I had steady income, which led to my next challenge: employment. Without references, with a gap in my work history, I couldn't easily explain, and with the constant fear that a background check might somehow connect me to the allegations in Seattle, my job search was demoralizing. I applied for positions well below my qualifications, willing to take anything that would pay the bills. After 3 weeks of rejections, I found Horizon Technologies, a startup so small they operated out of a converted warehouse. Their founder, Darren, was more interested in my coding test results than my employment history. When I vaguely explained I had left Seattle after a difficult divorce, he nodded sympathetically and didn't press for details. My salary was half what I'd earned in Seattle, but it was enough to cover my modest expenses. I lived frugally, cooking simple meals at home and avoiding any unnecessary purchases. My apartment remained sparsely furnished with second-hand basics: a futon that doubled as my bed, a wobbly dining table with 1 chair, and a desk for my computer. I kept no photos, no mementos, nothing that might trigger memories of my previous life. The psychological toll was the hardest part. I jumped whenever someone knocked on my door. I avoided social situations where I might need to explain my past. I checked over my shoulder whenever I thought I glimpsed someone who resembled Amanda or her family. At night, I relived the accusations, the betrayal, the violence in recurring nightmares that left me drenched in sweat. 6 months into my self-imposed exile, I recognized that I needed help. A community health center offered sliding-scale therapy services where I met Dr. Winters. A gentle, gray-haired woman with penetrating blue eyes, she created a safe space where I could finally voice the trauma I'd experienced. "Why do you think your wife believed her sister so quickly?" she asked during one session, a question that had tortured me for months. "I think Amanda always worried I was too good to be true," I admitted. "Maybe there was part of her waiting for me to disappoint her, just like her sister's boyfriends always did." Over weekly sessions, Dr. Winters helped me process my grief, not just for my marriage, but for my identity, my career, my sense of safety in the world. She encouraged small steps toward reclaiming parts of my previous self, starting with activities I'd once enjoyed. Following her advice, I joined a rock-climbing gym near my apartment. The physical exertion provided an outlet for my suppressed anger, and the focus required left no mental space for rumination. The climbing wall became my therapy between therapy sessions, the burning in my muscles, a welcome distraction from the burning in my chest whenever I thought of Amanda. It was at the climbing gym that I met James, a software developer who became my first friend in Denver. Tall and lanky with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, James was relentlessly positive, in a way that should have been annoying but somehow wasn't. When he invited me to join him and some friends for beers, after climbing one Friday, I surprised myself by accepting. That small step led to others. I began joining their weekly climbing sessions, then game nights, then hiking trips into the nearby mountains. Gradually, I shared selective pieces of my past, never naming names or going into full detail, but admitting I had left Seattle after my wife and her family turned against me over false accusations. Their unquestioning acceptance began the slow healing of my shattered trust. They didn't press for details I wasn't ready to give, instead offering the simple gift of normal friendship without judgment. At work, I channeled all my energy into proving my value to Horizon Technologies. I stayed late, volunteered for the projects no one else wanted, and quietly fixed problems before they became crises, Darren noticed. Within 18 months, I was promoted to lead developer with a substantial raise that finally allowed me to move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. With my improved financial situation, I began taking freelance projects on evenings and weekends. The extra income went into a savings account I thought of as my emergency escape fund. If history repeated itself, if my past somehow caught up with me, I would never again find myself vulnerable and without resources. As the third anniversary of my departure from Seattle approached, I made two significant decisions. First, I would stop checking social media for information about Amanda and her family. The habit had diminished over time, but still occasionally pulled me into dark spirals of what-ifs and alternate scenarios where someone had believed me. Second, I would start my own small consulting business alongside my work at Horizon. I had built enough client relationships through freelancing to take the risk, and the thought of being my own boss, not vulnerable to office politics or false HR complaints, was deeply appealing. North Star Consulting officially launched on my 35th birthday, a date I deliberately chose as symbolic of my rebirth. Within 6 months, I had enough clients to leave Horizon amicably and focus on my company full-time. Success brought unexpected healing. Each new client, each completed project, each positive testimonial rebuilt the professional confidence I'd lost. I began mentoring young programmers, finding purpose in helping others navigate career challenges. The personal side of life remained more complicated. I dated occasionally, never sharing my full story, and always finding reasons to end relationships before they became serious. The thought of being vulnerable enough to truly love someone again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff without safety gear. I simply wasn't ready to take that risk. My modest prosperity allowed me to purchase a small cabin in the mountains outside Denver. Just 1,200 square feet, with a remarkable view of the Continental Divide, it became my true sanctuary. Weekends were spent hiking nearby trails, improving the cabin's rustic interior, and enjoying the solitude that no longer felt lonely but peaceful. 4 years after leaving Seattle, I had built a life that, while different from what I'd once envisioned with Amanda, was satisfying in its own right. I had friends, purpose, financial, security, and a growing sense that Jessica had taken enough from me already. I would not let her take my future too. I stopped searching for information about the Romanos. I stopped imagining confrontations where I finally proved my innocence. I stopped rehearsing speeches I'd never deliver. On the anniversary of my arrival in Denver, I hiked to a mountain summit and symbolically let go, speaking aloud. My forgiveness, not for their benefit but for mine. The past finally began to feel like the past, a closed chapter rather than an open wound. And then, on an ordinary Friday evening, as I prepared a simple dinner in my cabin, someone began pounding on my front door. The knocking startled me so badly that I dropped the wooden spoon I was holding, splattering pasta sauce across the kitchen floor. Nobody knew where I lived except James and a few close friends, and none of them would pound on the door with such desperate intensity. Cautiously, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. My heart stopped. Amanda stood on my porch, her hair shorter than I remembered, her face thinner and lined with stress. She looked up toward the peephole, her eyes red from crying, her expression a mixture of desperation and hope. For one long moment I considered not answering, pretending I wasn't home until she went away. But something pushed me forward. A need for closure, for answers, or perhaps just morbid curiosity about what could possibly bring her to my door after 4 years of silence. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, standing firmly in the doorway to block her entrance. The moment she saw me, her composure shattered. She covered her mouth with one trembling hand, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Brendan," she whispered, her voice breaking on my name. "It took me so long to find you." I remained silent, my face carefully neutral, despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, hurt, lingering love, and bitter resentment all competed for dominance as I stared at the woman who had once been the center of my world. She looked down at her feet, then back up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Can I come in? Please, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, just 10 minutes. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered hesitantly, looking around at the cabin that represented the life I'd built without her. I gestured toward the small dining table, but remained standing, maintaining the physical and emotional distance I needed. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "It took years. You disappeared so completely. I hired a private investigator last year. He traced you to Denver, but lost the trail. Then 3 months ago, he found an industry blog that mentioned North Star Consulting and your new last name. I had started using my mother's maiden name professionally, another layer of protection against my past. It had never occurred to me that a simple business profile might lead Amanda to my door. Jessica lied. She blurted, her voice cracking. She was never pregnant with your child. She was never pregnant at all. Despite having known the truth all along, hearing the confirmation from Amanda's lips sent a wave of vindication through me, quickly followed by renewed anger. "I know," I said coldly. "I always knew. What I don't know is why you're here now, 4 years later, telling me what I told you the night your family destroyed my life." She flinched at my tone but didn't look away. 6 months ago, Jessica had a breakdown. She was institutionalized, and during therapy she finally admitted everything. She wasn't pregnant when she accused you. When she did get pregnant later, it was by a coworker named Alex, the guy she'd been seeing secretly. Amanda's hands twisted together on the table as she continued. "She told us she had been obsessed with you, that she resented how happy we were. She made up the affair because Alex had broken things off, and she wanted to hurt both of us." Each word was both satisfying and excruciating. The truth I'd known all along, finally acknowledged, yet coming years too late to save what we had. "The worst part," Amanda continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "is that we learned this wasn't the first time. In college, she accused a professor's assistant of inappropriate behavior when he rejected her advances. And 2 years before us, she told a boyfriend's wife they were having an affair when they weren't. I leaned against the kitchen counter, processing this new information. Jessica was more troubled than I'd realized, her manipulation more calculated and practiced. "And you never once questioned her story?" I asked, the bitterness I thought I'd overcome rising to the surface. "Not once in 4 years did you think, maybe, just maybe, your husband of 3 years deserved the benefit of the doubt?" Amanda covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I don't have any excuse that's good enough. I was blindsided, and Jessica has always known exactly how to manipulate our family." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "But you're right. I should have believed you. I should have at least considered the possibility that she was lying." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "My parents wanted me to give you this. They're too ashamed to face you themselves." I took the envelope but didn't open it, placing it on the counter behind me. "What's in it?" "A letter of apology and money. They liquidated some investments. It's not nearly enough for what happened, but they wanted to try to make some kind of amends." I laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Money. As if that could replace my career, my friends, my marriage, my dignity. Do they think they can buy forgiveness?" "Of course not," Amanda said quietly. "They know nothing can undo what happened. Marcus and Anthony are devastated, especially after they found out about Jessica's history of false accusations. My lip curled involuntarily at the mention of her brothers. The memory of their fists, their unquestioning violence, still haunted me occasionally. "I need you to leave," I said suddenly, the emotional toll of the conversation becoming unbearable. "I can't do this right now." Amanda stood slowly, looking as if she wanted to reach for me but knowing better. She placed a business card on the table. "My number and email if you're ever ready to talk more. And the name of Jessica's doctor if you want verification of anything I've told you." She paused at the door, turning back with eyes full of regret. "I never stopped loving you, Brendan. Even when I thought the worst of you, some part of me kept loving you. I'm not asking for another chance. I know that's impossible. I just needed you to know the truth, and how sorry I am for not believing in you when it mattered most." After she left, I sat in silence, as night fell over the mountains, the envelope and business card untouched. I called James, the one person who knew most of my story, and tried to explain the surreal encounter. "What are you thinking?" he asked, after I finished. "I don't know. Part of me wants to scream at her, make her feel a fraction of the pain I felt. Another part just wants to close this chapter for good. You don't owe her or her family anything," James reminded me. "Not forgiveness, not closure, nothing. But I might owe myself closure," I realized aloud. That night I read Frank and Mariah's letter, a painful account of their shame and regret, their pleas for forgiveness, their acknowledgement that nothing could truly make amends. I set it aside, deciding to respond when my emotions weren't so raw. The next morning I texted Amanda, suggesting we meet at a neutral coffee shop in town. She responded immediately, agreeing to my terms. Over cups of strong black coffee, I listened as she filled in more details about the years since Id left. Jessica had moved to Portland with Alex, had a baby, then accused another man of inappropriate behavior when her relationship with Alex soured. It was only when this latest target had irrefutable evidence of his innocence that her pattern of false accusations began to unravel, leading to her eventual breakdown and confession. "I don't want to try again," I told Amanda, clearly watching her face fall despite her claims of not expecting reconciliation. "I've built a life here that works for me. But I do forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying this anger isn't helping anyone, especially me." She nodded, eyes downcast. "Would you ever consider visiting Seattle? My parents, my brothers, they all want to apologize in person." I considered the request carefully. "Maybe someday, not now, but I'll think about it." 3 months later, I did return to Seattle, staying in a downtown hotel rather than with any of the Romanos. The meetings were painful but necessary. Frank, older and diminished by shame, could barely meet my eyes. Maria wept openly, her maternal instincts having failed both her daughters in different ways. Marcus and Anthony, the once intimidating brothers, sat uncomfortably across from me at their parents' dining table, their contrition evident in their hunched shoulders and halting apologies. I also received a letter from Jessica, still in treatment. Her acknowledgement of her lies and the damage shed caused was detailed and seemingly sincere, though I knew better than to fully trust the words of someone who had manipulated so skillfully before. The visit provided something I hadn't expected, not just closure but a strange sense of freedom. Walking through the city that had once been my home, I felt like a tourist passing through rather than an exile. The power the Romanos had held over my emotions diminished with each honest conversation, each acknowledgement of their failures. I returned to my mountain cabin, with renewed peace, ready to fully embrace the future without the shadows of the past obscuring my path. The final step in my healing came when I started dating Sophia, a wildlife photographer I met through a local conservation group. Her patient understanding as I gradually shared my full story helped me rebuild my capacity for trust. What I learned through all of this wasn't that people are inherently untrustworthy, but rather that self-worth must come from within. The false accusation took everything from me, but in rebuilding my life, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. My resilience wasn't dependent on others' belief in me. It came from my own knowledge of who I truly was. I sometimes wonder what my life would have been if Jessica had never told her devastating lie. Would Amanda and I have had children by now? Would we have moved to a bigger house, advanced in our careers, grown old together? These questions have no answers, and dwelling on them serves no purpose. Instead, I focus on the unexpected gifts that emerged from the wreckage: deeper self, knowledge, more authentic relationships, greater compassion for others who have been wrongly accused, and the quiet satisfaction of having rebuilt what seemed irreparably broken. Have you ever experienced betrayal by those you trusted most? How did you find the strength to start over? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption. And if you know someone struggling with false accusations or betrayal, share this video with them so they know they're not alone. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes your greatest strength emerges precisely when you think you've lost everything.